Welcome to the Fly Culture Podcast, bringing you interviews, reviews and fishing tips. Here's your host, Pete Tigus.
Fly fishing flows through the veins of Lyn Davies. His love of his local rivers in the Swansea area runs deep. He has done much in fly fishing, and we talk about his fishing timeline, the people who have impacted his life, his work with fly fishing magazines, being an instructor and guide, and his love of fishing tackle. He is a warm and kind person who cares about people and the rivers he fishes. Lyn, it's great to have you along on the podcast today. A very warm welcome.
Thank you, Pete. Good morning to you. How are you?
I'm very well indeed, thank you. And how do I find you? Are you in good spirit? Are you catching a few fish? Are you doing some fishing?
Yes, I try to get out roughly twice a week, Pete. Obviously, it's the weekend. It's a Saturday morning, so I'm looking forward to getting out at some point this weekend. And I'd like to say thank you very much for the ask on this podcast. I feel most honoured. So I forgot to say that. Thank you.
You're most welcome. I know we've been talking for a long, long time, and even when the magazine launched, we touched base as well, and we'll come on to that a little bit later. But for listeners, could you tell us whereabouts you're based and where you would consider your home water, and perhaps tell us a little bit about it?
Yeah, so I'm based in a little town called Pontarddulais near Swansea, and my home waters would be the River Lycha or Llwchwr, which is the Welsh pronunciation, and obviously the Tawy as well, which is the Tawy in West Wales, not the one that runs through the Swansea Valley, the Tawe. So this is the Tawy, T-Y-W-I, the Welsh spelling, T-O-W-Y, the English spelling, so Tawy in West Wales. So those are my main two home waters, I suppose.
And what are you fishing? Because obviously Tawy, I guess when we mention that, our thoughts turn to sea trout immediately. Would that be your first love? Would it be sea trouting that is?
Yes, it is a bit of a story. I mean, I grew up night fishing for the Siwyn, as we call them locally. Unfortunately, we've seen a huge decline over the years. The Tawy isn't so bad, but I'd be honest with you, I don't fish at night as much as I used to. Back in the 90s, I was on it, I was fishing 3-4 times a week because I could, I was able to. I didn't have a responsible job, I didn't have family, etc. And I was catching okay. I wasn't catching it as well as some people, obviously, who were more obsessive than myself. I focus more on the trout these days, if I'm honest. And I try and target the sea trout in the day as well. So that's my main function at the moment.
I'm sort of with you on the sea trouting. Those nights of going out late are way behind me, and daytime sea trout to me is really, really interesting. We have them on the tour. My home river, because it has a little bit of colour in it, I think that allows us to get relatively close. And they don't mind rising as well and will eat a dry fly. Is that how you tend to fish for them? What is your approach for daytime sea trouting?
Yeah, it's really interesting, Pete. I mean, I've heard Stefan and others talking about catching the sea trout on dries. If I'm honest, I've only ever caught one sea trout on a dry. I haven't really targeted them. Stefan mentions that you can recognize the rise forms late at night, etc. If I'm honest, I've never seen that really. If I'm targeting sea trout, it's usually with a nymph. So I'd be sort of straight line nymphing in the Euro setup. I've managed to catch them and lose very big fish in the daytime. I remember a couple of years ago, I was on the Tawy. Bright sunny day, crystal clear waters. I was standing in the middle of the river with my partner, Sarah. Not ideal conditions, but I knew that there was fish in front of me. Okay, so I was bugging, with two, one sort of red tag. I think I had on the point, probably a size 10, and then like a purpley sort of grayling bug on the dropper, and I managed to hook a sea trout, and as you know, immediately it erupted and all hell broke loose. And I would estimate this fish around about 8 pound. Bear in mind, I'm using 5 pound twang, so I'm shitting myself a bit. So I sort of walked back out the river a little bit. The river's, this fish has gone ballistic. It's run back to his home in under the trees. I just feel this, this sort of huge weight, as you can imagine, with this 10 foot 3 weight bent in half. And it happened. The actual dropper got caught in a tree stump or something under the water, and ping, the fish had gone. So I was absolutely devastated. But I actually knew I wasn't going to hold on to that fish. But the story goes that I reset up. I went back in, and exactly, I will not lie to you. The next cast I made, I hooked a 3 pound sea trout. And I was a bit more calm with that because it wasn't so wild, and managed to net it. And if you look at my YouTube channel, you can see that little video of that fish coming in. So that was a moment where I thought I cracked the code. If I'm honest, I thought, oh my God, I can catch these beasts in the daytime, on a bright sunny day. But it's not as easy as that, as you know. For whatever reason that day, these fish weren't spooked. They were clearly, I was only 10, 15 yards away from them. For whatever reason, they were happy to take that nymph that day. I've caught salmon. I've hooked salmon, I should say, grayling fishing. I've hooked salmon on the Lycha, but I haven't held on to them really. But yeah, I'd like to think there's definitely something there. I know there's not a lot of guys fishing for sea trout that way. And the added advantage is that you don't have to sort of be up in the middle of the night and stuff. It's more sociable hours. I've also caught many sea trout swinging wet in the right water conditions, as everybody else has. I don't do the double-handed stuff so much, but I am thinking about going down the switch rod route on the Towie. It will take a switch ideally there. I tend to use like a 9'6" weight or something, and just swing, sort of small doubles, as you know, if the water's right, then the fish are quite easy to catch, but it's few and far between these days. Yeah.
And tell me, when you're fishing for them, let's say you're nymphing for sea trout, does that mean that you're fishing in all conditions, or does it mean that you're fishing when the river's just dropping back after some rain?
Yeah, the Towie's a big river, as well. It's a medium to large river, so I wouldn't be up to my elbows in the water unless it was reasonably low, So yeah, I would tend to target the fish in low water conditions, if I'm honest. Whereas if the prime time would be after a spate, a day or so when the water's fining down. But I wouldn't really have the balls to go into that river deep at those conditions. I'd stay on the outskirts really and swing wets or larger stuff. Yeah,
that's really interesting to hear, because I'm similar to you, that they may be a byproduct of salmon fishing if I'm salmon fishing and the river's just coming down and they're running the river, but most of the time I'm similar to you, that I've been catching them when I think they've part of it, I think, and one of the big parts of it, I think, is knowing they're actually there, isn't it? And
I think so.
Yeah.
No,
that's all I was going to say, really, that, if you think, if you know that they're there, or you think that they're there, you've got a chance, but then you've probably only got one or two chances, really, haven't you? And then that window with that particular fish closes quite quickly, doesn't it?
Yeah, I mean, me and my mates, we've been fishing these rivers all our lives, and, they rarely change a lot. We all know where these fish hold, okay? So if I'm honest, there's only one stretch of the Towie that I target for these fish, because I know if there's fish in the river, then they are going to be there, There's a couple of other anglers that target them on the dry fly, local boys, which seem to do well. And of course, we're picking up the large brownies as well at the moment. So not as large as the likes of Kerry Thomas and Kyle Cheshire and all the boys on the Taff and the Ebu, but we're catching good brownies. Well, I am. I'm catching them up to about £3, which is a big fish for me, my local waters. I know the guys are catching them up to £5, £6, even £7. But I think the jewel for us is that we've got the opportunity of a sea trout, And for those that have caught them, especially in the daytime, they are absolute missiles. They are just so wild and strong. It's just a shame that we've seen such a decline over the years, isn't it? The numbers. Yeah. sad.
Yeah, it's a great shame, and we actually had it on our local news about salmon runs, and they've been really good. The BBC down here, and they've talked about pollution in rivers. They've talked about declines in salmon runs last night. It's lovely that they are attempting to reach a wider population or non-angling population, I guess, with that. But you touched on the brown trout there, and £3 is a fabulous fish. How do you like to target trout? Are you nymphing for those? Is it a combination? Are you looking for rising fish? How do you like to find your brown trout?
Yeah, if I'm honest, I usually go out with 2 rods set up, the dry and the nymph. As everyone would be the same, I tend to fish the dry as much as I can, but we all know that the nymph will always work. So I'm quite active really. So I try to walk the river as much as I can, looking for rising fish. I'm not one of these sort of Paul Proctor types, if I'm honest. I haven't quite got to that stage yet, but I sit and watch a river for an hour, waiting for that specimen to show. That's something maybe will come in my later career, but I haven't got quite that patience. But I have noticed myself slowing up a little bit. I'll go into a pool and I'll spend an hour on a certain run, whereas I would have been through it like a bloody whippet before. But yeah, to answer your question, very much focus on the sort of dry flies initially. I fished nymphs for many years, but I haven't really fished the Euro nymph style for the last 5-6 years, really, in anger. And it's been a huge change in the way that I fish, as with most fly anglers. It is a really effective way to catch all fish, really, isn't it? But I mean, dry or die, as they say, isn't it, Pete? That's the way forward. Yeah.
It's like you're saying, I guess it's each to their own, however people want to go about doing it, as long as they enjoy it. And that's the object, certainly why I guess we do it, and many of the listeners as well. So that's the important thing. But are you somebody then who carries lots of flies with them, or do you have a few patterns that are reliables for you?
Like most people, really, I probably carried far too many flies, don't I? I got thousands of flies. But as you know, Pete, you're the same probably. You only use half a dozen flies, don't you? I end up using a CDC emerger or some sort of olive tiny pattern. I love a red tag with a gold bead or copper beads. And I've discovered these purdy guns the last couple of years as well. They're devastatingly effective, aren't they? Particularly over skinny water on the droppers. And I like the spider fishing as well, if I'm honest. I went out last weekend and struggling a bit with the dries. It was a blustery, bright day. It was a couple of fish showing, but I actually took I think it was a 10'5" weight with me. So I set up some spiders, just 3 tiny traditional spiders, and I had some amazing sport. I really remember how effective that technique is. I love my spider fishing. But yeah, 9 times out of 10, I'd have a dry fly in my hand. I think the nymph fishes well after heavy rain, after water as well, particularly early season as well. Yeah.
And how do you fish your spiders? Do you fish them down and across, or do you fish them upstream?
A bit of both, really. I would say sort of upstream stroke square, with the mends as much as I can. Keep the rod high, obvious reasons. Try and fish 3. I think what I have on last Saturday or Sunday, it was snipe and purple, I think, partridge and orange, and a waterhen blower, or can't remember, one of the more traditional larger point flies. Some people put a heavier weighted point fly on, like a nymph or something, but I know people frown upon that. It's just a lovely way it's very, very visual. It's like a crossover, isn't it, between wet and dry. The fish, you actually see the fish, don't you? 9 times out of 10, turning your fly. And I just feel a trout takes so confidently with it. The only problem you've got is hook rates, isn't it? Which is where you probably lead into But yeah, and most of us started that way, to be honest, didn't we? Swinging little wets like that. And when I'm coaching as well, I'm teaching, I always sort of start with that technique, if I'm honest. Cut it down to 2 flies, maybe with a heavy point fly. Because, as you know, even if they do a shit cast, the river will sort itself out, straighten things out. And when it's going down an arc, you're going to have tugs and pulls, aren't you? And the tug is the drug then, isn't it? But yeah. So that's my approach with the spiders. Maybe I'm not fishing light enough rod. Thinking about it, I fish a 10-foot 4 weight. I know the guys are fishing a 3 weight, so even less, aren't they, with the spiders? But when you're standing in a reasonably big river and the wind is howling, you need somebody with a backbone, I think, to get out.
That makes perfect sense. And really interesting what you said about the spider patterns and how those traditional patterns have not really changed over a long period of time. Yet we talk about nymphing, and you mentioned perdigons, and I'm a fan of using those as well. How nymph patterns have continually evolving, continually, and it does make me wonder how what the motivation behind those is, comparable to spider patterns that people say, well, we love fishing spiders, yet somebody's going to mention a snipe and purple and whatever the other patterns may be. Isn't it interesting that those have not been needed to move on in any great way?
I mean, my personal opinion is I don't think people are fishing spiders so much as they used to. It isn't trendy, is it? The nymph situation, the Euro nymph, and if you go on YouTube, every talking about it at the moment, aren't they? I think over the years you've seen some evolution of the spider patterns, a bit of bling in them, and various modern materials. But for me, the charm is the traditional hackles and stuff, isn't it? The stuff you can't get hold of anymore. But I come from a family of huntsmen and outdoor people, so I was always having a constant supply of all rabbits and snipes and stuff. So I've been lucky over the years, but. And they're so easy to tie. Yeah, well, I actually say easy. They're not easy in the sense of the technique, but once you crack it, they're so wispy, aren't they? That they don't take long to tie if you tie them properly. Of course, less is more. It's just finding the right hooks. Really, over the years, I used to use the partridge. I can't remember what the code is. You probably remind me, Pete. The sort of what the wets with the barbed. I'm not allowed to say that now. But I moved on to these wide wets now, these partridge wide wets, which are, seem okay. They lovely looking hook as well, aren't they, with the spiders? But I got one of those weekly little leaf boxes, which is full of spiders. And whenever I show clients or newbies that, they're like, wow, they can't believe how wispy these and sort of delicate these flies are, So, I got a passion for that, even though I don't do it as much as I should, really. I think when I get older, I'll be doing a lot more. I love spider fishing on the Wye, because it's such a grand river, isn't it? And the runs and stuff. It's just a lovely way to be, especially for the grayling around September time when they're looking up as well. Fantastic way to fish. Yeah.
Lovely. Like that a lot. And you touched on that you come from an outdoor family. Did that mean that fishing was inevitable for you? Did that mean that you were going to always have a fly rod in your hand from an early age?
I think so. I'm very fortunate. My dad was a keen night fly fisherman. My cousins fished. All my family fished, really. I caught my first wild brown trout, probably about 4 or 5 years old, from the bottom of my parents' garden on a worm, as you do. There's a bit of a story here, actually. Probably spend an hour talking about this one, but I'll keep it brief. My grandmother's brothers, Arthur and Ivor Williams, very Welsh names there for you, Pete. They were very much pioneers of nighttime sea trout fishing on the Lacha, my local water, in the 50s and 60s. Now, they used to go fishing two up on an old British single motorbike. I think it was a BSA at the time. And, I can imagine they had old hardy glass fibre rods or whatever they had, simple setup, floating line, sort of 5-6 foot maximal leader, 12 pound, and they used to fish. Arthur was a very, very talented fly tyer. I'll have to show you some pictures, actually. He used to tie all his flies without a vice. So handheld, this guy, absolutely amazing. And one of the flies he developed was a fly called the Badger. Okay. And my dad and my father's twin brother, who used to fish as well, I remember these guys would not go fishing without these flies. And essentially, it's a large size 4, I believe, that big, size 4 mustard offset hook. I can't remember the code of the hook, but you probably remember them down, there's big down eye on them. And the pattern was a golden pheasant tippet tail, silver body, a black wool rib, some sort of badger hackle or black hackle. But the most important ingredient here was the badger hair, which was used on the wing. And growing up, we used to skin badgers. I found them dead, road kill. We didn't used to kill them, obviously, But we always had badger hair around us. I remember my dad's fly tying kit, which I was given, obviously. It had some prime badger hair in it of a certain colour. I think the male is more definite. It's more black and white as opposed to the female. It's more of a creamy colour. So yeah, this fly was shown, and my dad never used to carry fly boxes. He used to carry fly wallets, and everything would be set up. So this cast would be wound around, and about 6 foot cast with maybe a single point, single fly, maybe a dropper at times. But I'm not sure if I'm allowed to say this, Pete, but my dad used to fish with maggots as well. Am I okay to talk about this?
Of course you are.
Yes.
Nobody's listening.
Nobody's listening. Please don't tell anyone. But growing up, we used to breed maggots. And the reason we used to fish we used to put 2 maggots on the end of these big singles in the night. And it was absolutely deadly, to a point that my dad wouldn't go fishing without maggots. And when he didn't have maggots, I looked at some of his old wallets the other day. They had pieces of ether foam or foam to represent the bloody maggot, which is ridiculous, really. So and back in the 50s and 60s, you can imagine the water, the river was full of salmon and sea trout in particular. But the problem they had, they would rock up to the river at night time or just before, and they'd look over the edge, and it would be black. It would be running black from the wash off the local coal mines, So even though the river was full of fish somewhat, they had challenges in that way. Thankfully, the coal mines started to close in the 70s, and the water quality is better than ever now, but the fish aren't there. But back in the day, story has it that Arthur and Ivor used to come home because they couldn't carry the fish. Everything was killed, unfortunately, back then, and I'm guilty of that myself. I remember waking up on a Saturday morning and going down to the kitchen, and my dad's had been out the night before. I was too young to go then. And there'd be 3 or 4 sea trout up to about 5-6 pound, maybe bigger at times, just lined up on the dishboard on the kitchen sink there, ready to be processed by my mum and dished out amongst the family and friends, because they are unique taste. I guess you've tasted suet, I haven't tasted sea trout for many, many years, but wonderful time. So yeah, to answer your question, I come from a huge family of fishermen. I think I was the one that took it to another level. Really, I got more involved with the trout fishing. You have to remember, my dad wouldn't do anything but night fish. He had one rod. He had a Hardy Fibre Light Perfection 9'8" weight. He had a big rimfly reel on the end of it with a floating line and a bit of mono attached to it, and that was his kit. He used the same pair of wellies, same pair of waders for years. He just fixed them, proper old school. Everything he caught was killed, brought home. But he hasn't fished for about 30 years. My dad, it's a bit of a shame, really. But my father's cousin, Ivan Williams, which I have to mention, he's our chairman of our local Ponted Lice Angling Club. Probably the most passionate sea trout angler I know. Fished all his life, caught more fish than I care to remember. I've landed 13-pound sea trout for Ivan on our local river. We were very close. We still are close, but we used to fish a lot when I was in my 20s. Sad, really. I don't fish so much now, but I will tell you a quick story. Ivy on, I think it was last year. I hope you don't mind me telling you this, but last year was the first year that he didn't catch a sea trout at night. And that wasn't through lack of trying. That was just because the water conditions, the fish weren't there, etc. So it's a sign of the times.
Yeah,
So,
it's incredibly sad to hear these stories, and they keep coming out in many forms at the moment. And yeah, it's just so sad. And hearing those stories and those runs of sea trout, despite the coal and everything else coming down the river, the fish will still keep trying. It's whether we remove more to make that easier for them. But as we all know, there's many other issues we're having to deal with, like climate as well. So we will see how this plays out and continue to keep our fingers incredibly tightly crossed. But moving on a little bit, you studied art at Falmouth down in Cornwall. So is fly fishing a form of art?
Definitely. I think if you watch anyone casting, it's an art, isn't it? And I think I was having this conversation last night with my friend, actually, Chris. I have to mention his name as well. We were just having a giggle about the connection with creativity and fly casting, I guess, and fly tying. It's all interconnected, isn't it? That sort of obsessive nature I've got about neatness and everything being perfect. I'm actually a graphic designer, as you know, so I think I torture my sort of team in work, the detail. They show me layouts and I pick up line endings and spacing issues, and I'm just the absolute worst nightmare, but I can't help it. I just got that eye for detail, which surprises me when it comes to fly tying, actually. I'm not, I tie flies a lot, but I haven't taken it to a level of many people like Gareth Lewis, I know well, and people like that. These are fantastic tyers, and I don't know why. I've never really been that interested in the detail of fly tying. I tie flies to fish as opposed to show, so as you know, Pete, these flies, they don't have to be works of art, do they, to catch fish? But each to his own, I guess, Yeah. But what was the question? Sorry, you did.
Is fly fishing art, which I think you answered actually perfectly.
Yeah, well, I'll try my best, Pete.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And does that mean also, because photography has been part of your world as well, that do you think that's why many fly anglers like to take pictures as well, because of the environment, because of how photogenic fly fishing is?
100%. Look, most of us go to the most amazing places to fish, don't we? Any piece of river or still water or sea or wherever you are, usually it's an amazing surroundings, isn't it? So I think it's easy for us photographers to take pictures, isn't it, in those environments, isn't it? And of course our fish are so pretty, aren't they? Particularly the brown trout. They're all so different to their colorations and stuff. So yeah, 100%. You have to have a camera with you, don't you, when you're fishing? Albeit I don't carry. I just use the phone. I'm lazy,
And they work fantastically well as well. And I think that's probably where this has played into, social media and everything that goes with that as well. That, everyone loves to share those photographs, and it's wonderful to be able to see those as well. You also talked about your work as a graphic designer as well. And we should make a shout out to Kerry Thomas, as you have mentioned, and his book, which I believe that you were involved with as well.
Yes. I worked for the DVLA 9 to 5, for the last 25 years. But I also do some freelance work as well. And Kerry approached me a couple of years ago to help him with the branding for the Fishing in Wales stuff. So we spent a few months developing that brand. I designed a logo for him, etc. Lots of adverts for various magazines, etc. So that was done. Then Kerry and Alan Parfitt have been developing this book for years. I mean, they've fished probably well over 100 clins or lakes at the moment, as you know. So the next question was, Lyn, will you help us design this book? So as anybody knows me, I am a yes man. I rarely say no. So fortunately, when Kerry asked me to do it, it was during the winter months. So I had a little bit of time on my hands. I wasn't fishing so much. And so yeah, we started to think about the layout of this book. I got it behind me here, actually. I'll grab it just to remind myself. So I'm really lucky, actually, because Kerry is so organised with his content, as you probably know. He's a great writer. Alan is fantastic with the camera. And I was the creative, really. So the three of us together, it was like the ideal scenario, I suppose. So it started off, I did some initial concepts, some page layouts, etc. Just because there's a lot of repetition in the book. It's basically the top 50 lakes that Kerry and Alan thought were worth mentioning. So yeah, we agreed this double page spread, sort of an A5 picture of the lake. But the main thing is it showed the trout, the cutout of the fish from that actual lake as well, to show the different colours, etc. Showed a map then of the location of it and some basic information how to get it. And then Kerry wrote a spiel then about just an outline about the lake. Along with lots of other information. The back end was full of articles that Kerry and Alan had written, which is really good, and lots of local fly dressings as well. Look, this was a lot of work. Don't get me wrong. It's a bloody, how big is this? It's like 190-page book. I spent months on it, if I'm honest. But I said to Kerry and Alan, the reason I've done it is to be mates with you. I want to fish with you. I want to get to know you, and that was what this project was all about for me. I want to learn from the experts. I want to know much more about these Lyns, because it's a huge part of my fishing life as well. Absolutely amazing experiences going out on adventures, fishing these lakes. Yeah.
And I don't even fish those places, but I bought a copy of the book, because I always want to support creative people. And it is a beautiful book. So congratulations on the design work that went into that. And you've also been involved with fishing magazines as well, and wondered in what capacity, and was that fun to do?
Yeah, so this is a past life for me, Pete. I'm just going to try and remember some dates now. So back in 2004, Andy Petherick, probably know the name, Andrew Petherick, who's out of fishing, I believe, at the moment. It's such a shame, but Andrew is from my hometown, believe it or not. Not many people know that, but he's born and bred here. He asked me to come along to our committee meeting to do a talk about the magazine, just to show where he'd been and the format of the magazine, etc., because we were locals, he wanted to share some knowledge. Fantastic evening, great slideshow. Andy came up to me at the end of the night because he knew I was mad keen, etc., and he knew what my trade was, and he asked me if I'd be interested in becoming sort of a Welsh representative for the magazine called Today's Fly Fisher at the time. Obviously, I bit his hand off, and it started from there. And he would drop me an email saying, Lyn, can you do me a feature on this lake? Can you meet this angler and take photographs of this person? I didn't do all of the writing, but I wrote a fair few articles at the time. But one of the most memorable series for me, I don't know if you remember it, Pete, was a feature called The Apprentice. Do you remember that?
Yep,
series
absolutely, I do,
magazine?
Yep.
It was myself, Howell Morgan, and my best mate, Rob Evans. Now, Howell asked me, do I know an up-and-coming fly angler who wants to learn the trade? So I phoned Rob and gave him an opportunity of a lifetime, essentially. I said, look, mate, Howell wants to take us around the country. I'm taking photographs. He's going to teach you how to fish, lakes, rivers, give you all a tackle. It's like the dream job. So obviously Rob didn't think about it much. He agreed. And we'd done over a dozen jobs. We went, fished all the chalk streams, all the lakes, as I said, all the Welsh rivers, loads of English rivers. So we had some fun doing that. Then, of course, Andy left. I think it was about 2007. Steve Cullen and Tim took over. Tim might have joined Andy towards the end, actually. You probably know more than me.
Yeah.
And then I did an awful lot of work with Steve as well and Tim. And I'm very thankful for these guys, the opportunities they gave me, the places I managed to go, the people I met. Even though I was behind the camera, I don't think a lot of the anglers realised how keen I was an angler. So I was learning all the time, I was with the best anglers in the country. I was spending quality time with them. They were obviously under pressure somewhat to catch for the camera. So these were performing at their best, and I'm fortunate enough to go on many trips with Steve as well. And amazing guy, so right character, as you know, and an amazing angler as well. Tim Smith contacted me actually after his podcast the other day. I haven't spoken to Tim for a long time. I didn't realise he was farming, full-time farmer. But it was really, really good times. Quite stressful, if I'm honest. Photography isn't my profession, if you like. It was something I did as a sideline. But I had a go, I was pretty handy with the camera. I was a bit nervous to put it in full manual mode most of the time, if I'm honest. But the places you were going, it was set up for fantastic photography anyway, wasn't it? But I used to do the the articles I used to write. I used to provide the photography, and I used to do the diagrams as well, so I'd be able to illustrate, techniques and setups, etc., and give the words over. And as much as I like seeing my work published in magazines, I take so bloody long to write things, and my spelling isn't great either, as my friends and family know. But fantastic times, Pete. I miss that so much. All good. I can't think of anything else. Was there anything else about the...
I think it's lovely. And one of the things that I love the most about this podcast and the magazine as well is the way we try our utmost to create communities and put people together, and how this has helped you reconnect with Tim as well. And as you know, Tim and Steve have both been on here, and now yourself and John Hunter's been on. And, I know that was a halcyon time for the publishing industry, and things are considerably different now in that sense. But that warms my heart greatly to hear that you've been in touch with Tim. Yeah. And so that says so much about you guys as people, but also that special bond that you have shared through that time. And I often say that there is, although we don't do how-tos, because I think things like YouTube have knocked out the necessity for that these days, that you can easily find stuff online, so you don't need to read about it. Yet there is a little bit of the rebelliousness of what Andy, Steve, and Tim were trying to do in fly culture, and so it lives on in a slightly different way. So I'm thrilled to hear that you guys have caught up with each other. So that's wonderful. That's made my day from that point of view. And as well as this, as well, you've gone on to also do casting qualifications as well. And it strikes me that you're incredibly modest about your own fishing talents, and how you said that it's been wonderful to be around people, but somebody's obviously had a rod in their hand from the age of 4, although it may not be a fly rod. That I think a fly rod probably followed quite soon afterwards, that you went down the casting qualification route. And no matter what, and your extreme modesty, you've got to be able to handle a fry rod to get a casting qualification. So how did you find that process, and what made you want to go down that route of becoming a casting instructor?
Yeah, thanks, Pete, for that. Be humble to you say those words. So this is a whole story in itself, the casting side of it. I suppose I got to the stage where I wanted to give a little back. I suppose it's a bit cheesy, but I wanted to teach. I wanted to learn to cast better, to catch more fish. And from my photography experiences, I was used to, I was used to not fishing. When you're standing next to an angler in a river all day and you're chomping the bit, that teaches you a lot, that you're not there to fish yourself, which is another thing that's more guiding. But going back to the casting, I I remember I approached Alan Rees up in Shimano Valindra. Remember Judd? Bless him.
Yeah.
Alan was up there one day, and I went up to see Alan, and I had a lovely chat with him. And Alan took me under his wing, if I'm honest. He could see that I was keen. He could see that I wasn't a flyby. There's a lot of people that want to do these qualifications but don't necessarily want to put the time in. So within an hour, Alan was drawing me diagrams of loop structures and various other things to do with the mechanics of casting. And cut a long story short, I was mentored by Alan. I used to join the Gwent Anglers casting clinics with Mark Roberts as well, who's another character, amazing guy. But Alan was my mentor, and I feel so privileged to have spent a year or so with Alan. It was hard. I overthink things, as you know, Pete. I'd have a session with Alan. I wouldn't fish much that year, for example. I can't remember when this was. This was 2015. I didn't fish at all that year. I focused very much on the casting, as you've got to do. I would go up to Aberdare, where Alan's from. I would spend an hour or so in the local playing field with Alan shouting at me about my loops and what have you. I'd come back, I'd write, I know, sad to admit it really, but I'd probably write about 2,000 words of my learnings. I would keep a diary, a very strict diary of my practices there. And this went on and on and on. Alan then would invite me down to Carmarthen Amateurs to help with what he called the casting clinics. So Alan would be there as the resident expert with a double-hander. And then he would put me in the deep end and say, Lyn's here today to instruct on the single-handed stuff. So I'd do a little speech then and talk about snap and laps and stuff and all these mechanics, and spend the day really with Alan teaching the locals, which was a huge learning curve for me. But I'd like to think Alan could see that I was willing to put the time in, So anyway, time went on, and he was going, you need to put in for this bloody Gaia, this qualification. I was like, oh, it'd be all right, and I was a bit nervous about it, but I decided to do it, and I passed with flying colours. Only because I was so prepared, Alan looked me in the eye and he said, Lyn, you know it, you're gonna fly through this. And again, I was very lucky to have be assessed by John Reynolds, who's the current chairman of Gaia, Game Angling Association, and the late, great Tony King. And as you had Tony on the podcast. What an absolute gentleman of a man, and so clever, so laid back. But I managed to pass that. And I remember John saying to me, he said, on what did he say to me? Advance next, he said. Lyn, the first thing he said to me, I said, I don't know about that, John. But so I haven't been back to it much. I was quite actively involved in the local Gaia stuff, the Welsh regional stuff at the point of time. But Stu, Justin is doing a great job there. But I feel guilty. I'm not involved as I should be, if I'm honest. It's about an hour or so drive for me to where they meet regularly, and life just takes over, doesn't it? But I have spoken to Alan recently, and I know there's he's now chair of assessors, of course, isn't he? I'm really chuffed for Alan. There's some big changes ahead. I think there's even talk of a guiding qualification as well under Gaia, which I'll be keen to do as well. So maybe one day I'll move on to do the advanced stuff, or even dip my toe in the old double-hander stuff. You never know. But again, amazing time for me. Really steep learning curve. Learned so much. Met some amazing people, as you can imagine. I think I wanted to mention the rod I use, Pete. I know you like your tackle. But Alan was very lucky. Alan sold me his Sage SP 9'6", and he asked for it back the other day. He sent it back to him. Bless him. But fantastic tool, isn't it, as you know? And I think Alan introduced me to the I think it was a Sonic SK4 fly line. I don't know if you remember those, made by Shakespeare.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, nothing special, but it was, for some reason, this line matched that rod for me. It was a little bit on the light side, but it did what everything I wanted to do. So, of course, they stopped bloody making these fly lines, didn't they? Then, so I think I got 3 of them. I bought off eBay for the last few years, and I haven't opened them. I'm too scared to bloody use them.
And that's a great choice of rod as well, the Sage SP, which is my Hall of Famer. And when I ran the online magazine Eat Sleep Fish, I talked about the SP there. And funnily enough, my AAP guy I took with a 9-foot 6-weight SP as well. And I'm 100% with you. I still think it's a phenomenal rod. Mine comes out every now and again. I've caught some carp, I think was the last time I used mine. And it's a fabulous rod. And, I like you say, we talk about tackle on here a fair bit. And that's a beauty, isn't it? And do you fish yours much these days?
I don't, to be honest with you. And I certainly wouldn't fish with a bloody carp. It might break the thing. No, I don't. I haven't pulled it out of its case for a long time, to be honest with you. But amazing rod. Rod.
Get him out and give him a go.
That's what my mates say to me, you bloody idiot. Use these things,
Yeah, exactly. That's what you need to do. So tell me, with your photography role, you were seeing a fair bit of the UK. Do you travel much for fishing, or are your home rivers enough? Do they tick enough boxes for you, or do you like to travel to places to go fish?
I love to travel, Pete, being honest. I've got a 15-year-old son now, so I haven't been able to go a lot of places. I was a lot freer, obviously in my 20s and 30s. But yeah, I've been lucky with the magazine. I've been to Iceland 3 times. I've been to Spain a couple of times. I've been to the Bahamas, bone fishing. So I've done all of Scotland and Ireland for years as well. But no, I wouldn't say I was a travelled angler like you or any of the most of your guests. But hopefully in time I'll be able to go on the plane a lot more and travel. But I like to get away when I can. At the moment, Kerry and Alan, we went to Iceland last year, 3 of us. And this year, myself, Kerry, Terry Bromwell, which you probably know, and Dave Smith, we went to Spain as well. So I think it's become a regular occurrence now. Hopefully, I'll be away at least once a year abroad somewhere. Yeah.
And Spain is very interesting for me. Did you find some barbel while you were there as well as the trout?
No. We didn't see anything of the barbel. We were just after the brownies, really, this year, yeah.
And how did you find that? Was that fun?
It was hard. It was very hard, to be honest with you. I was with some really good anglers, as you can imagine, the names I've mentioned there. But fantastic, fast-flowing, gin clear, beautiful rivers, as you know. But you'd see the fish when you looked over the bridges and over the high banks, but trying to catch them is another thing, and we saw some good fish, up to about 3-4 pounds. I think the biggest fish we caught on the trip by Dave on the dry was about 12 inches. I mean, the biggest fish I caught was probably about half a pound. And you work your bollocks off of that, We were actually, we were catching 2, 3, 4 fish a day, probably each, Even Terry Blomwell blanked one morning, but don't tell anyone. It was that hard. But, yeah.
Fantastic. So it sounds to me as though you are an incredibly well-travelled angler, and I'd love to know if you have a dream destination. It sounds as though you've cast for bonefish as well. So I'll give you 2 destinations that you can choose. That would be a dream. One will be freshwater, and it may be somewhere that you visited before and want to go back, or it may be somewhere you dreamt about going to. And I'll give you a saltwater one as well. Where would those 2 be for you?
Wow. Well, the amount of time I spend in front of YouTube watching the Americans fish, it would have to be a river in Montana somewhere. Yeah. the amazing different types of trout species you get over the cutthroats and what have you. Having said that, I love my lake fishing as well. Am I allowed to have two freshwater?
Go on, I'm feeling generous. Go on.
Yeah, I mean, I've been to Lewis and Isla. There's lots more of the Outer Hebrides and the like that I'd like to explore there as well. Saltwater. I'm not really a saltwater enthusiast, if I'm honest. I have caught the odd bass and mackerel on the fly off the Gower Peninsula, but yeah, I mean, lots of stuff I haven't done there. I've caught bones, as you know, but maybe target a permit or GT or something, which you fortunate guys have been able to do. So somewhere exotic like that, would be nice to do again. Yeah,
good choices, and I love the locks as well. I think that's a wonderful choice as well. So I wanted to move on to we've talked about a fair bit, and I often say on here that social media will let us feel that the day that we've had on the water has been absolutely perfect. But have you had a fly fishing train wreck? Have you had a story that you can share with us that perhaps everything didn't go quite to plan?
God, you caught me now, Pete. I prepared for every bloody question except this one. Look, I always have train crashes. I'll give you one example that happened in Spain, just quickly. I was with Terry on this, because there's four of us fishing. We used to alternate, and I was lucky to be with Terry one morning fishing this river, which was treacherous to say the least. Huge boulders. We were taking in turns to fish. I was on the dry. Terry was, as you can imagine, was on the nymph. And I was frightfully nervous fishing in front of Terry, if I'm honest, at times, because he's an awesome angler, obviously, isn't he? And so we were approaching this lovely looking pool, ahead of us about 50 yards, and I saw it, and Terry saw it as well, and I think he knew. We didn't say anything, but we knew, Lyn's going to have a dry there. Try with the dry, isn't it? That's look perfect. It's lovely tail and deep pool. So anyway, Terry stood back and, yeah, you crack on, Lyn, crack on, but, as he says. And in I went now, and I was bloody so nervous to make this work, to catch a fish, I ended up in the bloody tree, didn't I, So instead of stopping and pulling the branch, and it carried on, got stuck in the tree. I think it was 3 times. And in the end, I was effing and jeffing, and we were joking because Terry called it ginger rage. He's got ginger rage. And she was laughing. So that was a bit of a moment, but yeah, to answer your question, look, every time you go out, something bloody happens, doesn't it? And I remember as a child, fishing local Lliw Reservoir, and it was amazing to see trout rise in front of you, stock rainbows, and then I'm fishing sort of William's favourites and just buzzers and stuff like that. And you always have a tangle, don't you, when there's a bloody fish rising? So you always get those episodes. And the rivers I fish, they're all overgrown. You end up in the trees. Even the best anglers do, don't they? But I'm lucky, really. I fish with my partner, Sarah, a lot of the time. So she's there to support me. She's holding my nymph rod or nymph. I'm like a surgeon, scalpel. And she's there, bang. And yeah, she holds my rod when I'm changing leaders or, as you know, Pete, I think I wrote in my notes, I'm a bit of a tackle tart as well. So, whenever I set up, I chuck my cap on the floor and put my reel down in the cap. I cringe when I see the competition guys, particularly, the way they treat their kit, they throw them in the back of cars with elastic bands around them and road rash on their reels, and it grinds with me.
Oh, you'd have kittens watching me then as well. And yes, there's a lot of people who could testify to that as well. But we've got what a warm, wonderful, kind person that you are. How would you describe yourself as a fisherman?
I would say passionate, organised, and open-minded, and hopefully fun. Fly fishing's been a huge part of my life. I might have eased off it at times, but it's always something I go back to. It's been fantastic for my mental health as well over the years. And yeah, as I get older, you sort of appreciate just being by the water. And it's not all about catching fish. I know it's a bit cheesy, but it is true. We all work hard in the week, and it's just that escape. I find I might go down the local just for an hour after work, just shut the laptop and off I go. And I'm catching 6-inch fish, I don't care. I'm not jealous when I see Kerry's posts of his 5-pound taff browns, I don't mind. I'm in my element catching pretty little browns, on my doorstep. So, I hope that answers that question.
I think that's absolutely beautifully put. Tell me then, when is fly fishing your main hobby, or is there something that you will do that takes you away from fly fishing, or do you have other hobbies that you like to take part in? What else is of interest to you away from fishing?
I do. It's really interesting, actually. Complete opposite to fly fishing, you would think, is I grew up doing trials and motocross. So my dad was a keen trials rider. My brother is still my nephew's Welsh champion, actually, at the moment. So I did motocross growing up until I had many accidents and skin grafts and what have you. I still got 4 bikes in the house here. I got a trials bike in the kitchen. I got 3 bikes in the garage. So I don't compete anymore, really. I might do the odd local trial. But I like sort of mountain biking as well. I've always grown up biking. In the 80s, I was sort of the no BMX kid. I'd wheelie sort of the length of the village and stuff, and always the clown jumping 13 people in the local park. That was me. So yeah, very much grew up on bikes. So my other passion really lies with motorbikes, and I thought I'd cracked it the other day where I decided to buy an Africa Twin. I don't know if you know what bike this is. It's one of these big adventure bikes, 1,000 cc's. I thought, right, okay, this is the answer for me to get to these upland clins easily, 2 up. But it only ever done it once, but there's too much bloody grief, refining your kit down and, because I carry the kitchen sink with me. But to answer your question, it's just, I suppose I call myself a part-time biker. Yeah.
Nice. So you've been around fly fishing for a long time. You've been involved in fly fishing through various means. How does it look now to you comparable to when you first picked up a fly rod?
Yes, good question. I think it's in a good place at the moment. Since lockdown and obviously gone fishing and things like that, I have a lot more inquiries about people wanting to learn to fish. A lot of people want to explore the great outdoors or even revisit fishing they did as a child. They can see the health benefits of it as well since lockdown. As you've said on many of your podcasts, the issue I see is, the youngsters joining. You probably know more than me when you do. The average fly fisherman, would you say 40-year-old, maybe older? I don't know. So we're not seeing many youngsters coming through in my local club. I think we've got three or four, if that. And if I'm honest, we've probably lost 40% of our members over the last 15, 20 years. With the license increase costs, the sort of restrictions on hooks and bait, etc., it is affecting the older guys on in local that think sod it, they're not going to bother going fishing anymore or even buy a license, So so that's quite sad, really. There's a lot of clubs really struggling out there, as you can imagine, Pete. We're relatively lucky. We are buoyant. We're still purchasing waters. We've got, doesn't seem like many, but we've probably got about 60 members, including committee at the moment, whereas in the past we'd have over 100. But I know some clubs are in a right state and they're talking about merging and things like that, to help them through these difficult times. But look, Wales is a fantastic place. Kerry's done a sterling job with the Fishing in Wales website. It's got so much to offer, from the huge browns in the rivers around the Taff and the Ebbw around Cardiff Way. You've got the unspoilt upland lake fishing, which is phenomenal, And of course, you've got the grayling on the Dee, the Irvine and the Severn. We've got some of the best grayling fishing in the country as well. So there's so much to offer in Wales. I feel that the clubs are certainly struggling, though, with the membership.
Yeah, that's beautifully summed up, actually. And, my hope is that we do see some form of a tick up. I do wonder if we, as I've said many times before on here, that the Stillwater boom of the 70s and 80s is flattening out. So perhaps we are reaching a sort of a level now that is slightly different. My hope is, like you say, the TV programs, everything else that can possibly help our pastime. And we've got these schemes in place to get youngsters involved. And, if we can get people in their 20s and 30s who have left fishing for whatever reason that may be back into it. And I think that's where social media plays into our hands a little bit. So the positivity about that, I hope will help us as well. So yeah, I'm sort of kind of cautiously optimistic that we may be doing okay, but it may just be on a smaller scale, and we have to be used to that. The worry is, like you say, if we're running a fishing club, or if someone's running a fishing club, maintaining membership will be the next thing. So perhaps that may be something that I can help in some tiny way, and we can push these things with people and get them involved with fishing clubs. So that thank you for putting that thought process in my mind. It's been wonderful to talk with you, Lyn, today. I've really, really enjoyed it. I would think you are fabulous company as a fishing guide, or if someone is wanting to learn to fly fish. What are your social media handles, websites for your coaching, guiding, instruction? Can you share those with us, please?
Yes, thanks, Pete. So my website is capturedonline.co.uk. Can you see the pun there?
Yo, absolutely.
Yeah, great. There we are. Email is lyn, Lyn, at capturedonline.co.uk. Socials, Instagram is lowercase captured online, one word. Twitter at captured_online. So I have got a Facebook page dedicated to Captured Online, but I don't really use it. And lots of my friends and family are not into fishing, so I don't push the fishing much on Facebook, if I'm honest. And my son Oscar just mentioned to me last night a social media platform called Threads. Yes, I believe you've joined. You're as sad as me, Pete. You've just joined up, have you?
I've just joined because I wanted to understand what it was about,
Yes,
and I thought it might be something not putting pictures, but it seems at the moment like a quasi Instagram from the company that bought you Instagram, and I know they want to have a go at Twitter, so that's the reason. I understand how Twitter seems quite a angry, unpleasant place, so perhaps Threads may be better moderated and. It may be a friendlier place. So we'll see. I put something out yesterday, but I don't know how these things will play out. I'm trying my utmost. I've noticed, I don't know if you're the same, and you said that about Facebook, but I'm not putting as much out that I used to, and I'm fishing a fair bit, but I'm just thinking, actually, I don't need to do this. So are you similar in that sense that you can step away from social media and not have that angst or worry that you're not posting something?
Yeah, it's an interesting one, isn't it? I mean, it's good to have some activity, isn't it, to keep interest for your followers, albeit I haven't got a lot of followers, but, I'm not obsessive with it. If I have a particularly good or interesting day, I'd like to share some stories or some pictures, but it's not the be-all and end-all for me. Look at what I've caught, It's more the write-up for me, really, the little story. Hopefully I'll give a little snippet of the adventure, what's happened in that particular session,
Yeah, I'm exactly the same as you. That's exactly how I feel about it. If I've got something to say, I'll say it. If I haven't got something to say, I don't say it. And that's the easiest way. Lyn, it's been wonderful to chat with you. Thank you for being such a wonderful guest today. I've thoroughly, thoroughly enjoyed talking with you. Thank you for being a guest on the Fly Culture podcast.
Thank you very much, Pete. Thank you very much indeed.
Everyone, this has been the Fly Culture Podcast. I hope you've enjoyed this episode as much as me. As ever, there's going to be plenty more coming along the line very, very soon. Thanks so much for listening.
The Fly Culture Podcast is brought to you in association with Fly Culture, a quarterly print magazine. For more information, please visit flyculturemag.com. You can also find Fly Culture on Instagram, Facebook and Twitter.